entrepreneur.
We've raised the bar.
Learn firsthand from successful business owners and create your own path to success.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
It's time to hit the road to growth with team lead of the Enriquez Group, Realtor Vinny.
Hi, Growth Growth listeners. Today I have an interesting one. Whenever I get someone that has multiple hats, it's always kind of interesting to see how the conversation is going to kind of take us. But we got Les on today. He has a book, Why You Should Give a Damn About Economics. He's also does some real estate development. He had a background as a CPA. I believe I saw that. You didn't have a background as a CPA? Les?
Yes, I was a practicing CPA for 7.5 years.
Okay, so yeah, a little window into being a CPA, and then I think on your website, I was looking at that. It talks about, one of the videos talks about like the political system. So, I mean, I guess walk me through when someone asks you how you define yourself. What does that kind of look like, Les?
Well, my career has been basically starting in accounting. My major in college was accounting, and I was with Arthur Andersen for 7.5 years, and a corporate controller for a couple of years after that. And then I started developing commercial real estate, and I've been doing that for 50 years now. So my background is mainly as a small businessman here in Clearwater, Florida. And over the course of the last 40 years, I've been very interested in economics and economic education. So I got very involved with that in the 80s and 90s. And then a few years ago, I realized this country was headed in the wrong direction. And it's a serious problem that most people don't recognize. So I started a nonprofit, a nonpartisan nonprofit called Main Street Economics. The purpose of that was to educate people about basic economics if they haven't had a chance to study it or learn it. And I'm not an economist, but I guess I'd call myself an amateur economist. And to explain to people the serious problems that we're facing in this country with the out of control spending and the debt that we're coming up with. And so I've written a couple of books, and this one, Why You Should Give a Damn About Economics, was really a two-part book. The first part was about 80 or 90 pages where I condensed Econ 101 into a short course, if you will, and made it very understandable for people that have never studied economics. And the second part of the book gets into the serious problems that we're facing and some of the ideas on how we can solve them. Our country is in desperate trouble, but nobody seems to want to deal with it. And that just continues on in Washington as we continue spending money we don't have, piling up debt, which you might be aware is now up to about $35 trillion. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The real debt, including unfunded obligations, is $128 trillion. I mean, the numbers are so big that people can't even comprehend them. So anyway, my mission has been, besides developing real estate, is to try and educate the public and get people to become aware of the problems and to speak up and speak out and try and do something about it.
So usually, I mean, when I have people on here that have some sort of book and trying to educate people, there's some motive behind it, either a class, either a coaching program, either, hey, if you're looking to develop yourself, I can partner up with you. I mean, what's the why behind writing the books?
This is just a pro bono thing that I'm doing because I think the country's in trouble, and I really want people to understand that and fix this problem before it's too late. Otherwise, we, the people, our kids, our grandkids, are going to inherit a country that's broken. We didn't get it broken, but we're in the process of breaking it. And if we continue down the road we're going down, there's a Ponzi scheme that's with our debt. We're borrowing money every year, now averaging about $2 trillion every single year, and we have no means to pay it back. The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, a nonpartisan government agency, projects the future, and they're projecting $20 trillion more debt in the next 10 years. And that's going to be an understatement if we stay on the road we're on, because it doesn't assume any kind of a recession, war, pestilence, pandemic, or anything bad. And even without those assumptions, it's a $20 trillion more, $20 trillion more in debt. So that's going to bring us to about $55 trillion of debt. And that just isn't going to work. The country, the Ponzi scheme that we're running is going to collapse, and that will be catastrophic for our country. So my whole motivation is to try and save this country from a fate that will be disastrous.
When was this, I guess, why developed or kind of came across? Was there a moment, or was something building up to this? Or, I mean, when did this moment happen for you to like, okay, I got to write these books and do this?
I started Main Street about 5 years ago with the idea of just going to provide educational material. As we've gone forward, I'm seeing the country go further and further into the abyss, and now it's turned into a crusade, if you will. The country is going to fail at some point in the future if we don't change course. And yet the politicians in Washington will not do it. All they want to do is get reelected. So they promise goodies to the people, and the people vote for the goodies. And we continue to spend money we don't have. We aren't paying for it with taxes, which economically is not a good idea if you want to grow the economy. But we're not paying for it in taxes, and we're not cutting expenditures. And so we really are going to get ourselves into a hole from which we cannot extract ourselves if we keep doing what we're doing. So it's kind of my mission to try and get this country back on a sound fiscal path. And I can assure you it's a most difficult task to do that.
Have you ever thought about running for politics yourself?
No, I'm not a politician. That's not my nature. I'd much rather be the instructor, if you will, try and educate people about things. I'm never going to be a politician. If I ran, I wouldn't get elected, probably. It's just not my thing.
Gotcha. Well, let's rewind, Les. So you kind of talked about it, went to college, the CPA, and then got to real estate development. I mean, did you have aspirations to be simply I guess a CPA, and not simply, but I guess a CPA? Or what was the original aspiration when you were younger? Do you recall?
Well, I went to college and I needed a profession, so I studied accounting, and I got a job right out of college after my undergraduate degree with Arthur Andersen, which was a very fine accounting firm that is no longer around. And I thought that's what I would do, accounting and finance. And then eventually the circumstances kind of brought me to a point in my life after about 10 years in the work world that said it's time to do something on your own if you're ready. So the employer I had at the time, I told him I was going to leave and go start developing industrial property. Since I knew nothing about development, construction, or industrial property, I thought that was a little audacious, but for whatever reason, he thought it was a good idea, and he was willing to back me financially. And so off we went. It took about 3 to 4 years to really become profitable. But after we did, we became quite profitable for a while. And then we've had our tribulations over the years. But I love real estate development. It's been a great business. It's had its ups and downs. And I've had my share of misfortune as well as fortune. But I continue to do it today. We're developing net lease retail around the Southeast right now.
So walk me through. So you said your boss, right? Your boss is the one that originally backed you?
Yes. Arthur Ruttenberg was a very well-known home builder down here. And I had been working for him as a corporate controller for a couple of years, and then I decided it was time to go on my own. And he thought that would work, and so he was able to help me. I had no money. He helped me get started, and he was a limited partner with me for 25 years after that.
What was your game plan? Do you recall what your game plan was when you went on your own? Because that's have to be a big jump, not having a salary anymore. And I mean, just
the game plan was to survive until I could make some money, and it took about 4 years before I made enough to have a decent income. And I was going to accumulate property over the years, which I did. Then we had some serious downturns, and I nearly went bankrupt a couple of times, but managed to survive that and keep going. And so over the years, it's been a very good business for me.
With the bankruptcies, or not necessarily bankruptcies, but the possible bankruptcies that did arise, what pushed you, I guess, to stay in that line of business?
I didn't have any choice. I owed so much money. I had to find some way to pay it off. Really, the first time was in the late 80s. We had a very strong run during the 80s, accumulated a lot of property and a lot of debt. Everything was roses until the late 80s hit. And then we had a serious real estate downturn, and everything turned upside down, and I owed a lot of money. And it took me about 6 or 7 years to pay it all off and settle with all those creditors. And then we had another good run. And it's been a couple of nasty times. So 2008 was another problem period. Same thing, got in trouble, managed to work my way through it, and paid off all the debts. I mean, I just did not want to go bankrupt, so I didn't.
I mean, looking back on it, don't you think if you would have done Chapter 7 and then gone back into the CPA kind of industry, it would have been a little more secure?
I didn't want to file bankruptcy. I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to work my way through it, even though it took me a number of years to do that. I just didn't feel right about filing bankruptcy, and so I didn't.
Why?
Because I didn't want to do that. It felt like it would be a bad thing in the long run for me to file bankruptcy, and so I just chose not to do it and work my way out of the hole, which I eventually did.
And I'll ask one more time, because I mean, I know it's almost matter of fact, right? That I didn't want to do it. But there's probably people listening right now that say, well, it's an easier road, and I'll just file bankruptcy, restart in a couple of years, and be okay with it. I mean, was that something from your childhood, or was that something you learned over time?
I think it was a stigma. I just didn't want to be a person that avoided my debts by filing bankruptcy if I could possibly find any other way. I was advised by some very smart people to file Chapter 11. I chose not to do that. And I worked with our lenders. We had well over $100 million of debt back in the 80s. And I worked with the lenders one by one, settled with some, paid off some. And I just didn't want the stigma of going bankrupt. It was adverse to me.
So you had 6 or 7 years that you worked your way out of the first issue, and then you had that run. Did you learn stuff before that run to change it, before the next possible bankruptcy arose?
I learned a lot. That was my MBA. I didn't finish my MBA. I did get it started. Never finished it when I changed jobs. But that was a big learning experience. And yet, 15 years later, we ran into another buzzsaw in 2008, and our projects got in trouble again. And almost the same scenario. Had to deal with all the lenders and all the problems, and eventually worked my way through that, and have been successfully developing ever since. I now owe no one any. I owe no debts. I've sold off a lot of property, paid off all the debts, and I'm up there in ages. I'm in my early 80s now, and I just don't want to have any more debt anymore. So I have liquidated a number of assets and have taken the cautious road from here.
I mean, I would assume I know what happened in the 80s and then '08, right?
Right.
Market correction. I mean, that kind of stuff. The housing crisis. Was it you were borrowing against basically the properties, and then when the market dropped, you basically the assets lost value? Is that kind of like the ballpark what happened both times?
Yeah, the real estate is a very leveraged business. If you're going to do anything, you're going to be borrowing money, and always the assets were worth well more than the loans until then the market changed, and all of a sudden the values dropped precipitously. Your vacancies went up. Most of my properties were rental properties, and we could no longer. The cash flow wasn't working anymore, so you had to hunker down and do what you could to get through it, and sell off what you could, settle with lenders, pay them off, do what you could until the business turned back around, which it eventually did, and we've had a good run ever since we recovered from the '08 recession. Things have gone well.
Now, we haven't had another real correction, or maybe small corrections, since '08. And I mean, what was that point in time when you started selling the properties to basically pay off all the debt to go, okay, if we do have something like this, I want to be kind of protected?
Well, 3 or 4 years ago, I realized that it takes a long time to go through a downturn and recover. And I'm in my 80s now, so I didn't want to have to do that again. So about 3 or 4 years ago, I sold off most of my investment properties. I got very liquid. And so now I don't have any debt, and I'm comfortable with that, and I don't have that risk element anymore. So a downturn in the economy won't be good for me, but it won't be catastrophic either.
Oh, so that was around COVID time. That's when kind of you started selling your properties.
It was probably a little bit around. Yeah, it was around COVID time. I guess the last of my liquidations was 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay, so the COVID wasn't the catalyst to basically.
No.
Okay.
It was. I was getting older, and I didn't want to have to go through another down cycle and have to recover at my age. So I decided I was going to just play it conservative and liquidate everything.
I mean, I know out in San Diego, I mean, the numbers look to show that we were going to have a downturn before COVID, and the opposite happened with COVID. I mean, was that what you were kind of feeling, or was it just simply because was there a moment that happened that made you think I'm getting older, or is it just?
No, what happened was I realized the time when I sold the property, the economy in the real estate market was very good, particularly here in Florida. And I'd say, 80% of my property was in Florida. So it was a good time. I sold it. The market got even better after that. Some of the properties I sold were resold within a few years at a higher number. That's okay. I was happy with the sale that I made, and that got me comfortable, so that I felt financially secure. And when you get to a certain age, you really don't want to take that risk. And so that's really what prompted it. The time I sold, the market was quite good.
What about during the original time, I guess, the 80s compared to '08? Did you have significant others in your life in both those windows of time?
The 80s were great years for me. Even in the early 80s, when interest rates were sky high, I did well.
Yeah.
And all through the 80s, we accumulated and developed more and more property. When we hit the 88, 89 recession, things really flipped upside down. The values dropped out, the cash flow dropped, and I just had to struggle to survive. We couldn't pay our bills until we can finally get the economy and our properties running again.
Well, I mean, did you have like a wife or a girlfriend or partner at the time?
No, I had a partner, but he wasn't able to help either. I had a family. I had 3 small kids that were in high school, and yes, I had to deal with all that and struggle through it. It's just something you have to do sometimes.
When you deal with, I guess, the struggle, and I guess as a kid, I mean, because there's people listening, right, that deal with struggle all the time. Is there something you've learned over those, I guess, 2 windows when you're dealing with the struggle and dealing with and having family to support too?
Well, one thing you learn is to anticipate problems. Things never go straight up, and if you don't anticipate the problems, which I failed to do, I have to admit that I did not see it coming in the late 80s. Things had gone so well for about 10 or 12 years that I thought nothing would ever go wrong that would hurt me, but I was wrong. I never anticipated a downturn as severe as occurred in the 88, 89 period. And that's what got me in trouble, is not anticipating how severe the downturn could be. It was even worse in 08. In 89, it was a real estate downturn. In 08, it was the entire economy turned upside down. And until COVID hit, everything went quite well. Interest rates were low, times were good, and we were able to make some good money during that period. And so I elected eventually to say it's time to take the risk off the table, cash in some chips, and become safe, and that's what I did.
So when does the passion, I guess, to help others kind of come about, like in the timeline and everything?
I think it started about 5 years ago when I started Main Street Economics, things have gotten progressively worse over that period of time, and so now I've kind of committed myself to doing everything I can to educating the people about the problems that we're facing that will destroy this country if we don't change course. We are headed directly at the iceberg. We're in the Titanic, headed for the iceberg, and the politicians are not willing to do what's necessary to change course. So the conclusion that I came to is, if we're going to avoid disaster, we've got to educate the public adequately in order for them to say, fix this mess, to the politicians, or I'll vote for someone that will. And the politicians will respond to that. I don't know they'll respond to anything else. I mean, their goal is to be reelected. I understand that. They have a job. They want to keep it. They're professional politicians. And if you want to move the needle in D.C., you got to move public opinion. Abraham Lincoln said it best. He says, with public support, you can get anything done. I'm paraphrasing. And without it, you can get nothing done. So my whole goal is to try and salvage this country before we fall off the fiscal cliff. And the only way to do that is to educate the public and get public support to do rational things in Washington, D.C. Right now, that is not happening.
So how will you know if you succeeded?
I'll know if I succeeded if we start getting our finances in Washington under control. And let me say this: I think I've picked Mission Impossible. I don't know if it's possible to do. When I started this, I told someone my chance of success is slim to none, and I think Slim died. Well, I don't know whether I can do what I'm trying to do. I'm just one small guy. I self-fund Main Street Economics. I don't have a staff. It's just me, and I hire professionals as I need to. I'm producing a number of videos now that I hope will have some impact. I've got a couple of monologue videos that I'm going to be producing. I've got another pamphlet that I'm writing. There's one pamphlet posted on the book called Restoring Fiscal Sanity that I co-authored with Dave Walker, who was a former Comptroller General for the United States. And so we collaborated on that book, that pamphlet, which is free on our website. The website is mainstreeteconomics.org. Easy to remember, mainstreeteconomics.org. And there's a quote front and center on the website that I think everybody should read, and it's from a person no one has ever heard of called Alexander Tytler. But it was so profound that I decided I was going to put it front and center on our website. If you have a minute, I could probably read you the part of that quote that I think would be relevant.
Right away.
Here it is.
All right.
This is Alexander Tytler, a Scottish judge and historian from 200 years ago. A democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the voters discover they can vote themselves largesse from the public treasury. From that moment on, the majority always votes for the candidates promising the most benefits from the public treasury, with the result that a democracy always collapses over loose fiscal policy, always followed by a dictatorship. That's exactly what's happening today. Exactly. The people are voting for the politicians that are promising them goodies, and our fiscal policy has gone to hell. We are spending money we don't have. No one's concerned about it in Washington because we can still borrow money. That's the Ponzi scheme we're running. We can borrow money, and then when we stop being able to borrow money, the whole world will collapse. And that day will come. I just don't know when.
Do you have a projection of how long out?
My best guess is within 10 years. And I have no way of knowing when that will actually happen. It will happen when investors no longer will buy our debt. Then the government will probably try to print money. All that does is lead to hyperinflation. That's why people need to understand the basics of economics. The inflation is nothing more than money supply growing faster than the supply of output. Then you have more money chasing less goods, and the only result you can get is to bid up the prices. That's what we're experiencing right now because the money supply grew dramatically. I mean, dramatically in the last years of Trump administration and the early years of Biden administration. And we keep adding fuel to the fire and trying to get inflation under control. I don't think it can be gotten under control without raising interest rates even further, because you have to decrease aggregate demand if you're going to get inflation under control. You can't grow the economy and increase and decrease aggregate demand. Those don't go together. You need a recession to get it under control. And the idea that we're going to have a soft landing is great, except it doesn't work. It hasn't worked. We haven't had a recession, but we also haven't gotten inflation under control.
Yeah, that's for sure. I guess a tough pill for most people to swallow. So, do you have thoughts, I guess, on this upcoming election? And I mean, I know you have any website politics, so I guess something I could jump into.
Well, I'm nonpartisan, so I don't take sides. I deal with policy, not politics. So okay. I don't endorse or support any candidate. But what I do talk about is the policies that they're talking about. And neither Republican nor Democrat have had good fiscal policies since Clinton. Clinton's the last person, the last president we had that balanced the budget. Since then, it's been all red ink, and it's gotten progressively worse from Bush to Obama to Trump to Biden. Each administration has just gotten progressively worse as far as fiscal policy goes. So the whole thing is we have to get fiscal policy under control. And the right way to do that, if you want to grow the economy, is to reduce the size of government and control our entitlements, which are completely broken. Right now, you have both candidates saying, I'm not going to touch entitlements, except entitlements don't work anymore. The demographics have changed and they don't work. So you have to touch them or they're going to get cut automatically by law when the trust funds run out.
Well, thank you, Les, for being here today. If people are looking to get your book, hear more about other speaking engagements you're going to have, what's the best way of them getting more information?
Go to our website. We're producing stuff all the time, mainstreeteconomics.org. Buy the book or read the pamphlets. It's got a lot of information in there that will alarm you. My whole purpose is to alert and alarm the public so that they will take heed of the problems that we're facing. And they are major problems. And if we don't address them, this country will not be the same in 10 years.
Thank you so much, Les. I'm going to give one last question. What advice do you give, I guess, to your children about where they should invest in if you think the economy is going to crash or the U.S. economy is going to crash?
I can't tell you how many times I've had that question asked of me, and I can't tell you how many times I've asked it of myself. I don't have a good answer. If the economy really fails, and I'm talking the macro sense, we can't borrow money.
Yeah.
The whole economic system is going to collapse, and I don't think there's anything you can do to protect against that.
What would you invest in other countries in?
No, they're worse than we are.
Oh.
We're the least rotten apple in the barrel.
Well, that's good to know. That's good to know. Well, thank you.
It's a big problem, and we need to address it now.
Well, thank you, Les, so much for being here. Hopefully everyone got some great information, great nuggets. I mean, the videos that I saw, at least on his website, I mean, are relatively short. I mean, 3 minutes, 4 minutes around there. So that's not too bad. I mean, they give a lot of information. So you can at least hear Les's perspective on what's happening. And I mean, even if you're a real estate developer, I mean, something to think about and listen to. But thank you guys for listening to the platform. Please subscribe to the podcast. Also, too, we do have a sponsor. We have Melody Cloud. So go in the show notes for Melody Cloud if you're looking for some relaxation, some music. Take a look at that. And also, if you need any real estate in Southern California, need a realtor, reach out to the Enriquez Group. The information's in the show notes. But please go find Les. Please subscribe. Please share. And go find Les. Bye, everyone.